And just so you know, most Episcopal churches across the country do that. That wrapping the gospel in this praise and this lifting up this moment of glory. Would everyone take a look at their bulletins, the front cover? You see this beautiful painting, Doubting Thomas, sticking his hand into the side of Jesus so that Jesus is who he says he is. So I personally think that Thomas gets a bad rap, because for eternity now he will be called Doubting Thomas in every single sermon that has ever been presented, and that is a lie. All he wants is proof. Anybody here not want proof? Anyone here ready to take it at total face value? So I'm ordained and I still have a billion questions. And the nice thing is that we are of a faith that encourages questions to be asked, and also encourages us to be okay when they are not answered. My children's sermon was going to be this, and since I really preach it for both them and you, I get to do it twice now. We are in a period where you should ask lots and lots of questions, because none of this really makes sense. And so if you have a question, ask it. Be okay with your parents or yourself saying, I don't know, I'll look that up. Or let's look it up together. But part of our tradition as Episcopalians is to encourage questions. Because in questioning, we learn more about our faith and more about who we are. It is not scary for us when college students don't show up for church every Sunday. We rejoice when they're there, but it's not scary for us when they're out looking at other things and discovering who they are. Because we really believe that what we have taught them has shown them the resurrected Lord, and that they will recognize that when they see it. And they will come home when they are ready. More knowledge about different things is not scary. It's just more knowledge. Speaking as one who sort of showed up at the doors of church, even though it was, 100 feet away from where I lived. Really. And speaking as one who has worked in campus ministry, they do come home when they need to hear it. The liturgy becomes part of who they are, and when they are homesick, they show up at the church's door, and they feel like they're not so far away. Which is why bringing them when they're young is so important. Good job, Mommy. And Dan. And every other parent who has their kids here right now. Because it becomes part of who they are. So encourage the questions. Encourage them to learn other things. Because honestly, every one of us is a doubting Thomas. And to teach them that that's not how we grow in our faith is to actually handicap them in their faith. That's the children's side, a little higher level than I would have given the kids. But I want us to take a look at this gospel, because I want us to notice what the disciples are doing. They have locked the doors. They have kept the world out. They are afraid. They are right to be afraid. Their leader has been murdered, and people are seeking to arrest them as well. one of us, when we're under assault, would do the same thing. And in the middle of this room where they are holed up and frightened, Jesus appears to them. Can someone tell me what's the first thing he says to them? Peace be with you. Absolutely. And the reason he says this is because he knows that they're afraid. He knows not only are they afraid of those who are on the outside, but all of a sudden, this person who's supposed to be dead is right there in the middle of them. So the first thing he says to them is, peace be with you. And then he shows them his hands and his side. And they see their leader resurrected in completeness. Not a ghost, not a spirit, but full body resurrection. This is essential to our faith. This is what everything is hung on for our faith. This is not a partial, sort of see a ghost, take a double exposure picture. This is a full bodily resurrection. The tomb is not just empty, but Jesus is standing in front of them. And the first thing he does is give them peace to calm their fears. Then they have a little party, right? The person you've been following all around shows up. High five, fist pumps, dancing. All of that's happening. My kids' children's Bible has a picture of all the disciples, quite literally, giving each other high fives. It's their favorite page in the whole book. And in fact, my youngest says, Jesus is alive. High five, Mommy. But he then starts the next part of his ministry with them by giving them peace again. He says to them, peace be with you, which should give them a clue to stop short on their high fives for a few minutes. As the Father has sent me, so I send you. What did God the Father send Jesus to do? To sacrifice even his life for our salvation. He's telling the disciples what is going to happen. He's not saying to them, I'm here, let's hang out, let's party. He's saying, you have followed me. The next step in following me means that you need to do as I did. Be willing to sacrifice yourself for the sake of spreading the good news and bringing the fulfillment of God's kingdom. Scary words, aren't they? And if you look at the history of the church, that is what every single one of them did. None of them made it out of their ministry alive. Here's a hint, neither do you. No matter how you die. Not a single one of them had an easy road afterwards. But when Jesus gives them that peace the second time, he is telling them, I am with you in this. You can go out and do this and take the peace of the Lord with you because I am with you. Because you know now that I am a God who is willing to give up everything for you and who conquers even death. So you will have life. Pretty awesome. Then we get to Thomas. The The last time Christ says, "Peace be with you," he is telling the disciples what the church must look like. So here's Thomas, who says, "Unless I have proof, I'm not going to believe this." Really, Thomas is every single one of them. He just had the bad luck of having to go out and buy the bread for the day. It's not like Jesus didn't show up and show them the wounds immediately. So poor Thomas gets this rap for eternity. And he is exactly who each one of us identifies with, if we're really honest. The resurrection doesn't make sense. There are things that we don't have answers to, and that's okay. That's where this whole faith thing takes a step. And yet, because of the discipleship of that group of 12 and the women that followed them around, we are certain in the fact that we follow a resurrected God. One that has dominion over all of creation. And we can be that way because they were willing to question it. The final part of that piece is, can you imagine being Thomas coming back and the 11 saying, "We saw Jesus." Sorry, it would be 10. I apologize. Saying, "We saw Jesus." And Thomas saying, "Unless I believe it." And they're like, "You're calling us a liar?" Can you imagine what that household was like for the week that Jesus didn't appear back to them? Can you imagine the conflict and the upheaval? Can you imagine a church splitting almost immediately after it's founded? Sound familiar? Over something as silly as whether or not they're lying? See, John's purpose in telling us this story is for us to know that God intends for us to be one. God intends for the church to be the example to the world of what it is to live and follow Christ as one. Does that mean we all pray the same way? No. But it does mean that when we stand up and say, "I am a follower of Jesus Christ," other people who have been baptized and who have said that they are following Jesus Christ know exactly what that means. It means that we are called to constantly work at bridging gaps and differences with each other, rather than finding the things that separate us. It means that places like here, this Interfaith Chapel, work because we acknowledge that we worship in different ways, and yet we know that we have one God. And that each church is working towards the spreading of the good news. Now, the reason that this works here is because in Vail we had no choice. There wasn't enough property for each church to have their own space, so they made it work. The reason it will continue to work here is if we continue to work on bridging those gaps and not sweating over the small stuff. And at any particular moment, that is in peril if we forget that God, first and foremost, gives us peace. The rest is details. It means that my politics don't have to agree with your politics, and we can still connect. It means that I may not like the way you handle the situation, and I will still give you the body of Christ and his blood. Because that's what connects us. It means that if we don't look alike, or if we don't sing the same way, or if I really annoy you on that particular day, which happens, we are still one family brought together by a resurrected Christ. So John's gospel tells us how to be the church. First, in our fear and our brokenness, God gives us peace. In our joy and our celebration, even before we go into the fire, God gives us peace and goes with us, celebrates with us, and cries with us. And in our division, God pulls us back together. By reminding us that he gives us peace. I don't know about you, but a God who's willing to risk everything for the sake of keeping us together, to reveal who he is in the world, is exactly the God I want to follow. The God who gives us peace and love before sending us out into the mission field is exactly who I want to follow. What do you think? And knowing that that God has gone through the same things that we have done and loves us on the other side of it, gives the entire church a